Welcome, fair people of YouTube. Today I bring you the third part of the... Actually, I think it's fourth one. Yeah, it's fourth part of the Arena Guide or Arena Compendium, as I like to call it. Today we'll be looking at a pretty difficult class to draft, that is Rune. This is probably the hardest class to draft and probably the weakest class in the arena, just because the entire class is very highly synergistic and it's extremely hard to draft well, a good deck, because you will always lack some synergies and most of your cards will be very often useless. So let's quickly cover this topic, guys. Rune has two mechanics as a class, right? Just as Shadow has Necromancy, as Blood has Vengeance, Rune has Spell Boost and Earthright Synergy. Spell Boost is generally pretty easy to build, especially with the new cards we get, which is basically you draft a lot of spells, and preferably spells that are also a Spell Boost spells, so you can, just build the chains of Spell Boost until you are satisfied with what you are doing. Earthright, on the other hand, is pretty hard to build and predict, because if you, for example, get Earthright runes at the beginning of the draft, and you want to pick them because they are powerful, you can probably not even see a single Earth single for the entire draft. So you end up with, like, for example, well, in the older meta, 5 mana 2/4 Ancient Alchemist. That is amazing if you have a single sigil, but if you don't have a sigil, then Ancient Alchemist is just a 5 mana 2/4, and that's really bad. So guys, today we'll be checking at the new meta, so Arena after the rotation of Silver Basics and also entire Standard expansion, which is kind of a similar hit to the class as to the Forest Craft, which lost a lot of Fairy Generation in this rotation. Rune lost a lot of Earth Sigil synergy. So we'll be kind of judging the cards by the current meta. So if in the future, if we get some more Sigil cards or Earthright cards, and maybe even more Arena Spell Boost synergy, then the opinion of mine might change, right? It will probably change with every expansion. I will be continuing this series, as in on every new expansion I will wait a second to try out all the classes and new cards in the arena, and then I will update the guide. But for now, guys, let's live in now, live in here, and we are starting with an Insight. So Insight is a very basic spell, 1 mana, cycle a card. It does spell boost your cards, which means that Insight is a good card if you have a lot of spell boost synergy. If you don't, then when do you play Insight? Well, in Constructed, Insight is a good card because it thins out your deck. You are more likely to find your other cards, so Insight is pretty good. But in Arena, you don't really look for combos unless you are playing Rune, I guess. But Insight won't spell boost that much because spell boost decks won't be consistent in Arena. And also, you won't really look for combo, you rather look for playing on curve in Arena, which means Insight is a pretty bad spell. But if you drafted already a lot of spell boost synergies, you probably won't discard, so Insight will get 2 stars from me as a highly synergistic spell boost card. Magic Missile, it's literally an Insight that deals 1 damage, so I'm gonna also give it 2 stars. It's kind of better because you get additional ping, and pings are important on Arena. But for 2 mana pinking just 1 card is kind of underwhelming. Like, compare it to Lerial, which for Evo Point gains an additional 4/4 body. I'm gonna say that Lerial is much better than this card, and Lerial got only 4 stars. So I could give Magic Missiles 3 stars, but I'm gonna stick to 2-star rating. Conjur Golem, this is a 2 mana 2/2, which is already 3 stars, and I'm gonna actually give it a 4-star rating. Why? Because Rune doesn't really have great 2-drops, and Conjur Golem is probably the best 2-drop you can find in Rune. Even though it doesn't have an effect, it will always spell boost your spell boost cards, and it's really hard to build a deck in Rune without a single spell boost card. So Conjur Golem as a premium 2-drop that also spell boosts your card is a very valuable card. Windblast. So I was talking that 2 mana deal 1 damage is pretty bad. But as it is impossible to draft a deck without a spell boost card, it's also impossible to draft a deck without a single spell, which means that Windblast will almost always get some value. And if you read Windblast as 2 mana deal 2 damage with higher potential, it actually seems really good. So I'm gonna say that Windblast is again a highly synergistic card with spell boost, which means it is getting only 2 stars. But don't sleep on this card, as it is actually a good addition to every deck that plays already a solid amount of spells. Summon Snow. This is a very low value card, because you always have to assume that you will not spell boost your cards, that you will not draw your spells. And if you assume that, you kind of have to look at your spell boost card like, what does this card do for me if I don't spell boost it? 3 mana summon a 1/1 is terrible. 3 mana summon a 2 1/1s is also terrible. 3 mana summon 3 1/1s, that's actually fine. So if you spell boost Summon Snow twice at least, you get a decent card. But to make it a pretty good card, like a 4-star card, you would have to spell boost it 3 times, and that's really unlikely. So I'm gonna give Summon Snow a 0-star rating. You don't want this card, usually it will be just a loss of tempo, and you will use it just to spell boost your other cards by the cost of your board space. Conjur 2-Sum. Now, this is literally 4 mana summon 2 golems and spell boost your card once, right? If it was actually like 4 mana summon a 2/2 and a 2/2 and draw a card or something like that, I would rate it higher. But this card is pretty underwhelming. I mean, you cannot deny that it has the value, right? For 4 mana, you get 2/2 drops and you spell boost your cards. That's actually good enough, right? And yes, that's actually good enough. This is a very decent card, but it is not extremely good. Also, it is a 4 mana drop, which means that on turn 4, you drop this card and you actually want to evolve over your opponent. What if your opponent played a 3 mana 4/4, right? Because a lot of classes can play 3 mana 4/4 on Arena. And if your answer to this is Conjure 2-Sum and evolve into the 3 drop, you kind of lose the value because you lost your Evo point and all you have left is a 2/2. Usually, if you had other 4 drop, like for example a 3/4, if you evolve it over that, you would get a 3 mana 5/2. I mean, not 3 mana 5/2, a 4 mana 5/2 that would be killing the enemy minion. Like I'm talking Goliath, right? Just standard 4 mana 3/4. In this case, you only live with a 2/2, which means your opponent can easily evolve over it or can even save his Evo because your board is not threatening. This is why this is regularly worse than a standard 4 drop. And I'm gonna say that this still gets 3 stars, because it's a 4 drop, which gives you options, and it also is very good in your spell boost decks, right? So yeah, that's definitely 3-star card. Pretty decent, but pretty average. Fury Embrace. Now, well, how to judge this card? I always say that removal is important on Arena, but for 8 mana, you could kill a unit and also get a 5 mana 13/13 to your hand. So Fury Embrace is really terrible if you don't play any spell boost. But if you actually get the spell boost, you can get something like a 3 mana kill a unit, 4 mana kill a unit, even 5 mana kill a unit is fine, which means you have to spell boost it 3 times in order for it to be average. And that's a pretty big requirement, let's be honest. On Arena, it's not simple. You are not cycling like a regular D-Shift, you are not spell boosting like a regular Daria, you are playing Arena, which means that Fury Embrace will very often be a very expensive removal, which is nonetheless a removal. So I'm gonna give this card a 1-star, because it still is a removal and removals are important. If you are able to spell boost it to a 5 mana, it's very average and very playable. If you spell boost is below 4 mana, it's a 2-star card, but even in highly synergistic spell boost decks, you will have troubles in fighting and spell boosting all your cards without a really good cycle mechanic. Crystal Bombardier. Now this is a 4 mana 3/4 that evolves into a 4 mana 5/6, which means this is a premium 4 drop, right? This is what you want on your 4. It also has additional effect of spell boosting your cards, which is kind of the addition, but well, let's be honest, you probably get 1 spell boost from this card, which means it's a 4 mana spell that summons a 3/4. And I would play that. I would definitely play that. It's definitely better than Conjur 2-Sum, but I cannot give it a 4-star rating because it's not really particularly great. It's just average. That's why we'll give it a 3-star rating, which is the average star rating. Witchet Emilio. 3 mana 2/2 feels bad, but if you cast a spell on turn 1, it's a 2 mana 2/2, you can play it on curve. If you spell boost it twice, it's a 1 mana 2/2 that you cannot really play on curve, but it can fill your curve later into the game. And that's actually pretty decent. But again, if you are not drafting spell boost deck, this card will always be a 3 mana 2/2. Of course, you will have some spells. You cannot avoid drafting spells, but it will very rarely get spell boosted in the meaningful time, which means that this is usually just an addition that kind of gives you a bit of value but costs you a card. Like, imagine would you play a 1 mana 2/2 that discards you a card? Probably yes, in Constructed, definitely, especially in Dragon. But in Arena, you probably would want some more value for it. So I'm gonna give it a 2-star rating, which means that if you are spell boosting a lot, if you have plenty of spells, if you have like 3 insights in your deck, Witchlet is definitely a good deal. Grand Gargoyle. Now this is a great card, because it's actually a bronze that gets you a Earth Sigil, and it's also a premium statline 5-drop. So I'm gonna give the Grand Gargoyle immediate 4 stars. You want to play it no matter what, it's one of the best 5-drops in Rune, and you definitely want to have it, even if you are not playing any Earthrights, because there is no way that you predict that your last pick, the Legendary, won't include a Earthright card, right? So even if you don't have any Earthrights, you probably want to pick Grand Gargoyle. For these stats, you are definitely fine sacrificing one of your board space for the Earthright that you, or for the Earth Sigil that you won't use, because Rune doesn't really go white on the board. And again, it's really hard to find a good 5-drop in Rune. There are some good 5-drops, but most of them went away with our rotation. So that's pretty much it, guys. 4-star card, definitely draft it, just for the possibility of drafting Earthrights with it. Scrap Iron Smelter. This is not a card you want to draft early, but it is a card you can draft early if its pair is actually really good. But the problem with this card is that it is literally a 1 mana 0/2 taunt that takes your additional spades on a board if you don't have any Earthrights. So I guess you could not play it or save it for a, some dramatic case that you actually need a taunt to survive. But generally this card is a straight up synergy with your Earthrights and gets a 2-star rating. Because it's a straight up synergy card, like this is the definition of 2-star rating. Redhot Ritual. This is kind of different because it's a 2 mana deal 2 damage, and that's actually very good on Arena. You want those cards, and it also opens you a possibility for Earthright synergy as all the other cards, but it's actually better than the other cards because it's actually a removal, and it's a very cheap removal. Imagine that on turn 4, if you actually have a 4-drop that has 4 attack or something like that, or you play a 5-drop that has 4 attack, when your opponent evolves over it, on average, evolved minion has 6 to 7 HP, right? If your minion had 5 to 4 attack or 4 to 5 attack, Redhot Ritual will on average kill the evolved minion. And it only costs you 2 mana, so you have additional, let's say, 5 or 6 or 4 mana to play your own minion and maybe evolve over something else that your opponent had left over. That's a very good tempo play, and it opens a possibility of playing with Earthrights, so drafting it early on doesn't deny you any value, and also says that you can draft at least a single Earthright and probably you will get it off. So I'm gonna give Redhot Ritual 3-star rating, and I think that it's a pretty good card. Witchbolt. Now Witchbolt is a pretty straightforward card. It's a spell, it's not a spell boost card, which means that it will get its value every single time. Now the second requirement for the additional draw a card is that you have to have evolved minion, but every game you gain your evolution points, and you definitely have minions in your deck, so it's pretty easy to meet these conditions, right? The only problem is that if you don't draw a card from it, it's literally a 3 mana removal, and it cannot remove any minion, right? It only removes minion to 4 HP, and if you think that is actually a problem, from the tone of my voice, you are jebaited, because this is not a problem, guys. This 3 mana spell can kill a 5-drop on average, and killing a 5-drop with 3 mana spell leaves you 2 mana to play your other cards, which means you gain tempo, and that's why this card will get 3-star rating. It's not really epic, it's not a must-pick card, but it fits really well if you are low on 3-drops or low on removal. Remy and Rami Witchy Duo. 4 mana, 3/4, premium stat line, doesn't lose stats on Evo, premium 4-drop, 3 stars immediately. But if you have the Sigil, you additionally gain a 3/3 ward that is worth about 4 mana. Like, you are literally getting a 4 mana worth of value if you have a Sigil, which means this is a 0 mana 3/4. That's crazy insane, guys. I'm gonna say that you pick Remy and Rami every time, except when it doesn't fit your curve, if you have 4-drops already. Even if you don't have Sigils, Remy and Rami is a good pick. And I think that's why I will give it a... I would love to give it a 4.5 star rating, because it's on the brick of 4 and 5 star card. But since you usually draft at least one Sigil, because if I am not mistaken, there is 8 Sigils in meta right now. And 8 or 6, one of these. You have to check me, guys. I actually prepared this information for this video, but I forgot mid-recording, so I'm sorry about that, guys. But I'm gonna give it a 5-star rating, because this is a premium 4-drop with extremely high gain if you actually have a Sigil. So that's definitely a must draft card, but be careful about drafting it when you already have tons of 4-drops. Or if you know that you don't have Earth Sigil. Like, for example, if it is your last pick before the legendary pick number 2, so the last pick of the draft, and you don't have any Sigils, you can probably pass on Remy and Rami, because, well, you are guaranteed to not get a Sigil in your legendary pick. Shadow Witch. Now, remember, guys, I always repeat that 5/5 stats is really good, and you want to draft it no matter the cost. But 6 mana 5/5 is actually a great cost. Like, 6 mana 5/5 should have additional ability, and Shadow Witch actually does. If you have a Sigil, you can transform any minion or amulet into a 2/2 golem. So basically, a worse petrification, but nonetheless a pretty good card. And I'm gonna say that Shadow Witch is a 4-star card, that it will serve you well as a 6-drop even if you don't play Sigils, but don't pick it if it doesn't fit your curve. That's the definition of 4-star cards. You have to be aware that curve is more important than your general card value, and Shadow Witch, if it fits the curve, it is good card because of the 5/5 stats. I kind of cycled here, but there is really no more arguments. Like, its Sigil ability is not that important, and its stats is what really bites this card. Stats are pretty good here. Multipart Experiment. Now, this has the same problem as Summon Snow, that summoning your 2/2s in that late into the game usually won't have any effect unless you summon like 4 of them, or 5 even. So filling your board with 2/2s is not always the best decision in the late game, unless you play like boosters to the tokens, something like Ektar in Shadow. So Multipart Experiment generally gets a really low star rating from me, but I have to be fair and rate it higher than Summon Snow, because it is better than Summon Snow. You are getting 2 times the value, right? For 2 times the mana you are getting 2 times the value, but you don't need 2 times the cost. I mean 2 times the cost in form of cards. You are playing still just 1 card. So this, for the additional 1 mana in the cost, is saving you a card. And that is a very fair mechanic in the card games. So I'm gonna give Multipart Experiment 1 star. You want to avoid it, but if you are forced to pick it, I mean, you can take it. The flavor text on this card is quantity over quality, right? I would say that on Arena we can agree with this sentence. Summon Ice Form, a terrible card that will usually buy you 1 turn. It is pretty good in late game if you want to if you are out of Evos and you want to set up your board advantage. For example, playing a Mammoth and summon Ice Form on turn 10. Your opponent is probably not able to get through it to kill the Mammoth. You can set up lethals this way, you can set up favorable traits, but I don't think it's worth playing this card in Arena. I'm gonna give it a 1 star rating though, just because of the example I said, that in late game it can actually protect your big minions that can then go to face or take the valuable traits, and that's nothing to laugh at. It's definitely a threat that is in the consideration, but you generally don't play around Summon Ice Form in Arena because people don't pick it. Like, this card is actually really underwhelming, just as in, let's bring here the example from Hearthstone. I always compare Summon Ice Form to Frost Nova from Hearthstone, that freezes all your opponent minions. If we actually had a card for 3 mana that freezes all your opponent minions in Hearthstone, that would be broken. Probably it would cost around 5 or 6 mana to cast a spell like that, just because impact of minions in Shadowverse is bigger than in Hearthstone. So Summonize Storm is a 1-star card, you probably don't want to pick it, but if its pair is really good, feel free to get it. Especially if you are playing Spell Boost. Time-Worn Mage Levi is a easy 5-star card, just as in Constructed, just as in Arena. It's a 2-mana 2-2, so you never can go wrong with it. And it also has a really powerful Evolve effect that is probably one of the most broken Evolve effects in the entire game. So I don't really think I have to explain Time-Worn Mage Levi. If you met Rune in Constructed play, you see what this guy can do. And he literally does the same in Arena. Just a bit more consistently, I would say, because... I mean, less consistently, because you don't always plan like that. You don't always have consistent 2-drop, so sometimes you will be forced to drop Time-Worn Mage Levi on 2. And because it's a gold card, which means in Arena you can draft it only twice, and that will cost you your strong bumps of a legendaries. Rime Wind. It's a spell boost card that is pretty terrible. Imagine that you actually count it as a summon ice form. I mean, not summon ice form, as a summon snowman. Or conjure snowman. Conjure snow, summon snow, I think that's the name. I just reviewed this card, but I already forgot. I'm not really good at that. But it's summon snow with additional 2 mana that says for every snowman you summon, you can add 1 mana to a limit of a mana cost of a creature you want to bounce to your opponent's hand. Which means that for 2 mana, if you want to bounce a card, you probably want to bounce at least a 3-drop. Which means Rime Wind is optimal on 3 spell boost, so basically at 2 spell boost plus base effect, and 5 mana with 2 spell boost that summons 3 snowmen and bounces 3 drops to a hand is good. It's actually good. But problem with Rime Wind is, again, you have to spell boost it in order to gain any value from it. If you don't spell boost it 2 or 3 times, it's a really bad card. That's why we are giving it 2 stars, as it is really synergistic with cheap spells that cycle, so Magic Missile, Kaleidoscopic Glow, and let's say Into the Looking Glass, or just as simple as Insight. Calamitous Curse. It's a 6 mana card that banishes everything with 2 health. And you have to look at it just as this card, because it's really hard to pull off Earthright synergy right now. Which means that Calamitous Curse will generally be a 6 mana banish everything of 2 health. But if your deck has really high amount of sigils, it will be a very consistent and one of the most powerful removals in the arena. The only problem with this card is that it is a gold, so sometimes you will get it offered on the first pick, and you cannot really predict if you will get the sigils for it. So I would recommend not picking Calamitous Curse on your first pick, but definitely picking Calamitous Curse on your last pick if it fits your deck. That's why this will get a 2-star rating. Sun Oracle Pascal. So 5 mana 4/5 is premium stat line, so this should be a 3-star card. And its effect is really hard to pull off. First of all, you have to have minions, and second of all, you have to have Earth Sigil. On turn 5, right in the middle of Evo Wars, you probably don't have minions unless you play them on the turn you are playing the Sun Oracle Pascal, which means that she is playable not sooner than like turn 7. And 5-drop on turn 7 is pretty low impact because, well, it cannot kill the Mammoth, and Mammoth is the average card of turn 7. So Sun Oracle Pascal is a 3-star card. I'm gonna say that because she has to be a 3-star card as a 5 mana 4/5 that evolves into 6/7. That's definitely a 3-star card, especially in Rune when you don't really have those amazing 5-drops. But her effect is really hard to pull off, and it's really synergistic. So if we look at the effect, I would give it a 1-star rating, but because of its stat line, I'm giving it a 3-star rating. Even though you will never pull the effect off, and she takes the spot of a legendary, it's still a 3-star card, just because of the stat line, because stat line is the most important in Arena. Craig, Wizard of Mystera. So that's a 3-star card immediately because of a 2 mana 2/2. But if you actually pull off the spell boost, if you have like Ocular in your deck, or Witchette, or God forbid Daria, you are actually getting tons of value, and Craig is definitely worth it. I'm gonna give Craig a 5-star rating, just because you will always play some spell boost minion. There is no way to avoid spell boost minions in Arena, unless you really try hard to do it, and still you might just get offered a spell boost minion in both picks. I would pick Craig every single time, because Rune is actually an aggressive class in Arena. Some people may not believe it, but Rune is probably the most tempo-based class in Arena. The moment you lose your tempo, you can't win the game. So you have to play your minions early and then protect them with removal and spells. That's how you play tempo games. So Craig giving you not only the 2 mana 2, but also chipping down your other minions, so you can play on tempo even higher. For example, Craig, if you spell boost an Ocular with him, you can play Ocular on 3, and that's a 3 mana 3/4. That's really good. So Craig, definitely a 5-star card, you always want to pick him. Next up we have Timeless Witch, which is a 4 mana 3/4 that evolves into 5/6, 3 stars immediately. Her effect is basically a ward. They cannot damage your face until they kill her, but they can still kill your other minions before killing her. So I would say that Timeless Witch will stay at 3-drop, I mean at 3-star card, because she is just average. The effect doesn't really matter. In Arena you play on board anyway, there is no merit to attack face before attacking the Timeless Witch anyway. So pretty straightforward, 3 stars, good stats, pick her. Ocular. Now, Ocular is a 5 mana 3/4, so it definitely cannot get 3 stars, because as I said, you will not always spell boost it. But if you spell boost it with only Craig, it's actually an amazing card. If you spell boost it with one spell, it's actually an amazing card, because it's a 4 mana 3/4 that evolves into 5/6. There is actually nothing wrong with that. That's why Ocular will actually get 3-star rating from me. Even though Ocular is a 5 mana 3/4, this is one of the exceptions that in spell boost mechanic that says this card is probably good every single time. Because imagine, if you top deck the Ocular and you don't have a spell in hand in Rune, that probably means you are top decking the cards anyway, like you are playing on 1 card a turn. And Ocular, if you are playing 1 card a turn, costs only 5 mana, which means you can definitely play. There's no way you are playing on top decks before turn 5. So Ocular will actually always be playable, and you can always just wait, play something else, and wait to spell boost Ocular to get a better value of its cost. I will not give it 4-star rating, just because you cannot spell boost it sometimes, and that's a bummer, but if you have at least 1 spell boost on Ocular, it's a really good card. Bladematch. Now, Bladematch is kind of different, because to make it a novice trooper, you need 3 spell boosts, and as we know, card that has 3 spell boost requirement is actually a bad card. The only difference between Bladematch and Rime Wind is that Rime Wind is cheaper by 1 mana and has a removal effect to it, also summoning minions, while Bladematch is literally a minion that will always trade. And trade really low, because it's only a 2/2. So I would say that Bladematch is extremely synergistic card to a point that you actually don't want to draft it at all, because even if you synergize with it pretty well, it's still maybe not enough just. So that's definitely a 0-star card. You don't want Bladematch. Rite of Exorcism. It's actually so good. It's better than Dance of Death, it's better than Call of Cocytus. It's a 5 mana removal for a minion, which is basically Dance of Death, because face damage doesn't matter that much. But you can also cast it for 3 to kill a 3-drop or less, which means that it's a very versatile card for killing something early game, killing something mid game, and killing something late game. You can kill with it literally whenever you want, and the only point when it will not be worth it is probably turn 5, because just giving your turn to remove your opponent's last play and not get anything additional to it is generally pretty bad. But if you are a late game deck, then you are literally just skipping a turn together with your opponent, and if you have stronger late game than your opponent, it's really worth it for you. So I'm gonna give Rite of Exorcism 4 stars. This is a really good removal, probably one of the best, but it's definitely not a must draft. Disaster Witch. Now, this is actually a must draft. 6 drops are pretty common actually. 6 drops are on point with Rune, but not to the point that you have too many of them. And other reason is that you actually don't need that many 6 drops, because as I said, Turn 6 is probably something when you consider removing your opponent board, so your current board can actually stick. That's how you play Runecraft. And Disaster Witch is the exception in this case, because you actually want to play something else. And 6 mana 5/4 is actually meta, like, you could say that 5 mana 5/4 is something you would want to play, but 5 mana 5/4 is a bit too powerful. 5 mana 5 attack minions are very rare. So read Disaster Witch as 6 mana 5/6, which is average stat line for a 6 drop, that sacrifices 2 health to give you a 1 mana deal 3 damage. You can read it as 7 mana 5/4 deal 3 damage. That is actually more versatile than Red Dragon, which deals 4 damage to a target and is out of arena, by the way. But it can also go face, which means you can play on the aggressive game plan that you probably have in mind when you are drafting a lot of early drops in Rune. Which means Disaster Witch will actually be a 4-star card, because you cannot draft it too much because of the high curve which it represents, and you generally don't want that high of a curve with Rune. Dwarf Alchemist. This is definitely a 5-star card, and let's explain why. Because it's a 2 mana 2/2, that's immediately a 3-star. It's giving you a sigil, that's definitely a 4-star. And it also has a very powerful evolve effect that draws you a card, and it's not any card, it's the card that guarantees you synergy with your Earth Sigil. Which means that it's 5-star card every single time. It's one of the best source of sigils in the entire arena right now, and it's definitely better than any other sigil in the game right now. So pick it every single time, even if you don't play sigils or Earthright. This card doesn't force you to put the Earth Sigil on the board, which means that actually you can just keep it in your hand and just ignore it. If you don't have any Earthright, just don't play your sigil. And it's literally just sitting in your hand. You will not overdraw on arena. You will just literally play a 2 mana 2/2, and that's actually great, right? Actually, if you play a single Earth Sigil, like if Dwarf Alchemist is your single Earth Sigil and you have a single Earthright, Dwarf Alchemist will be better than any other sigil you can possibly get. Definitely a 5-star card, definitely you want it in your deck. And there is never too many 2-drops, that's why you can draft it as many times as you see. It's also a silver, so you won't see that many of them, but definitely pick it up whenever you see it. Clark Arkin Scholar. So this is one of the rare cases of a 3-drop in Rune. 3-drops are really hard to come by in Rune. Clark is a premium 2-drop, I mean 3-drop. It's a 3 mana 2/3, that's premium. It also has the effect of spell boosting all your minions by 2, which means that it's a very highly synergistic card. But how often do you have spell boost minions? Like, playable spell boost minion in Arena is probably Ocular, probably Daria, and probably Chimera. So that's like 3 cards, 1 bronze, 1 silver, 1 legendary. You can also add, let's say, Witchet for another bronze, and Bladematch if you are really desperate and you had to pick Bladematch. Clark is definitely a good pair to him. The only problem with Clark is that it's generally just doesn't boost anything. So it's just a 3 mana 2/3, and that's how I'm gonna judge it. As a 3 mana 2/3, no effect. It's a 3-star card. Even if you occasionally pull off the effect, it's still not good. It's still not common enough to give it a 4-star rating. Piercing Rune. This is a spell, which means it plays plays well with your spell boost mechanic, and it's relying on your Evo mechanic, which is a crucial piece of Arena, so you will always boost this with Evo, unless you draw it really late into the game. And what does it do? It deals 2 damage, so ignore the face damage for now, alright? Because face damage is not that meaningful. Actually, in Rune, it's really good to deal face damage. So cards like the Thundering Ogre, the Thunderstrike Ogre, something like that, the 8 mana 6/6 that deals 3 damage to a face. We talked about it in neutral phase. Piercing Rune is probably worse than the Ogre because it doesn't provide you the body, but if you actually boost it with Evolve, 2 mana deal 2 damage to a minion is good enough already, and it is actually also dealing 2 damage to the face, which is not meaningless, but it matters very little. So I'm gonna say that Piercing Rune is a 3-star card. I'm not gonna go crazy on this rating. You generally want to pick it, but you generally don't need to pick it. That's why 3 stars. Annabel of Mysteria. I like to call her Annabel because that's a nice name. And Annabel is the friend of Greya, and she actually summons Greya and evolves her. So we already talked about, actually no, we didn't talk about dragon yet, but Greya is, didn't we talk about dragon? We talked about forest, sword, and neutrals, yeah. So Annabel is the opposite of Greya, and you have to think which card is better, Annabel or Greya. Greya summons Anna, which evolves into deal 1 damage to the board. Anna summons Greya, which is a 4/4 that can attack twice. So you generally get to kill 2 cards, you would think, right? You can trade Greya into a 2/2 and then into a 5/4, and you are extremely happy. Yes, you would be extremely happy for 8 mana to get a 3/3 that can still evolve, and also a 4/4 with Rush that can attack into a 2/2 and then into a 5/4 and kill a total of 7/6 stats. That would be amazing. That would be literally 8 mana summon a 3/3 and kill a mammoth. That's just insane. But the problem is that on turn 8, there is a very high chance your opponent will be playing big minions, and small minions will usually have some very strong effects that do not require them to trade well. That's generally the rule in Arena. Sometimes, of course, you will drop a 2/2 without effect on turn 10, let's say, because you just top decked it. Sure, in that case, Anna gets free value. But the problem with Anna is that it's 8 mana, and it doesn't really fit aggressive playstyle. You, I would say, can pick Annabel if you actually have a lot of Earth Sigils. Why Earth Sigils, would you ask? Anna doesn't have Earthrise. That's because Earth Sigils are a very defensive mechanic, and they will always play defensively with Earth Sigils, and they will always stall the game with Earth Sigils. Anna gets to play especially well in late game because she's 8 mana, which means that the longer you stall the game, the more effective Anna will be. Also, Anna has a great possibility of protecting your other minions by killing 2 minions of your opponent, especially killing the low health, low attack minions, like for example 2-drops that threaten your evolved minions that traded into something big and lost a lot of HP. Let's say they are left on 1 or 2 HP. Then Annabel fits really well into the deck. But again, you have to play aggressively until turn 8. And if you are in the lead on aggressive deck until turn 8, you should win the game already. So Annabel is a pretty much win more card, and that's not really wrong, but that's not really good. I'm gonna give Annabel 3 stars, which means that you should pick her, but only if she really fits your deck. Professor of Taboos. Now, this is a pretty much 5-star card. This is a 6-drop, which means that you won't see many of those. And this is a gold, which means you won't see many of those, right? I mean, first, those were to the 6-drop, and second, those were to Professor of Taboos. But Professor of Taboos has amazing effect, because imagine that you have a 5-drop, and you play Professor on 6, you trade the 5-drop, you evolve the Professor of Taboos, and you kill something else. Like, you kill 2 minions on turn 6 with playing Professor of Taboos. That means you are left with Professor of Taboos, which probably will be something around, let's say, realistically something like a 5/3 or a 5/2. And you also get 2 zombies, which means you got 5/7, 2/2, and a 2/2 for an evo point at 6 mana on turn 6. That's actually a great tempo play. So Professor of Taboos will most likely be very well played, even if you don't play Sigils. But there is also possibility of playing with Sigils, right? With Sigils, Professor of Taboos is even stronger because it will kill additional minion and summon you additional zombie. That's like crazy insane. Like, killing a random minion is worth 4 mana, maybe 3. But killing a minion and summoning a 2/2, killing a random minion and summoning a 2/2 is worth definitely 4 mana. So Professor of Taboos will give you, let's say, 5 mana value in a minion, 2 mana value in a zombie, 4 mana value in another zombie and destroying a random minion, and then if you trade something, you get additional 2 mana value for a zombie, which means you are in grand total of... Wait, that's really hard to count. 5, 4, 2. Let's say you get on average from Professor of Taboo, you get 11 value of mana. That's crazy insane. Professor of Taboos is crazy insane. 5-star. Pick it 2 times, pick it on your first pick. Even if you don't have Sigils, this card will always fit. If you have 1 Sigil in the deck, try to save it for Professor of Taboo, because this effect is simply insane. Secret of Erasmus. Premium removal, 3 mana, deal 5 damage. Easy to play around, because on Arena you won't go white, unless your opponent is something like Forest and has plenty of fairies. But Forest is really underplayed on Arena, even though it's not the worst class. But Secret of Erasmus is really easy to play around, and you also can play it in the late game to summon Erasmus himself. And Grand Summoner Erasmus is actually, I believe, 8 mana 6/7 card that deals 5 damage to a random minion, or is he 8 mana 5/6? I don't know. Erasmus is unplayable, it's a meme card. I actually never opened him, so I never saw him on my eyes, to be honest. I also never played Secret of Erasmus. Even on Arena, I never played it for 9 mana. But Secret of Erasmus is definitely decent as a removal and gives you the possibility of tempo play or the initiative play on late game, which means that Secret of Erasmus is a very good card. The only problem is it takes the gold spot. And now you have to wonder, is it actually worth the gold spot in Arena? The answer is yes. Even if you don't play the late game, 3 mana deal 5 damage, kills evolve 5 drops very often. It kills 6 drops or 7 drops that traded into something. In late game, generally you can trade a 2 drop and this spell into a 7 drop. And that's crazy insane. That's so much tempo. So I'm gonna give it a 4-star rating. I pressed several buttons at once. That's a 4-star rating. Which means you want to draft it, but don't overdo it. It's definitely not the best card in Arena. Daria, Dimensional Witch. So, how do you want to evaluate Daria? Daria is a crazy powerful card. Daria is a spell boost card. And Daria is a 5-star card. Daria is a 5/5 card. Which means that, as I said, 5/5 is always meaningful. And 9 mana cost should not stop you from appreciating this card. Especially when you can spell boost it, so it is cheaper. Especially when you can spell boost it with Craig, so it's even faster and gives value to Craig and Clark. And especially when Daria says draw 5 cards if you have empty a hand. Like, you can even ignore spell boosting it, and it's still a great card. If it is the last card in your hand, or let's say the second to last, because it's really hard to play a 9 mana card without, top decking something else on that turn. Daria is a great card and you will definitely play her. What's the only problem with Daria? I would say that the only problem is that you can top deck it in the early game and it will be really hard to play it for the entire game. But that's not even a problem, because if you top deck it early, that means every single spell you cast will spell boost it and bring it closer to you. It also supports aggressive playstyle so much, because it's a refuel, right? You will always get 5 cards from Daria, 5 fresh cards. That's exactly what you want to do with refuel cards. And Daria is amazing. I would say that she is probably one of the highest priority legendary cards. I would not pick her over Professor of Taboos unless your deck is very spell boost heavy, but I would definitely pick her. I would say it's my second opinion. I mean, of course, in legendary pick you can get something like Olivia and Bahamut. I think you pick those over Daria, but I really don't want to give Daria 4 stars. I will give her 5 stars, just because I experience Daria on Arena very often. I actually like to craft spell boost deck on Arena really much, and Daria is always the MVP of these games. So definitely pick her, guys. Definitely give her a try. And be smart about her. You don't want to lose value, you don't want to lose resources. As long as you have any play at least as strong as Daria or just slightly weaker, you should make this play before dropping Daria. And now we have Dazzling Healer. That, I believe, is already Tempest of Gods expansion, so we have just halfway of the cards done. That will be a pretty long video, but Rune is really hard class and we have to explain a lot of things. Dazzling Healer is a 3 mana 2/3, 3 stars. Dazzling Healer can heal your minions, not kill, if you spell boost it. That's actually a great ability because you can play it after trading with your other minion. For example, let's say it's turn 8, you play the 5-drop, evolved it over your opponent's 6-drop, your 5-drop is left on 1 HP, which means your opponent can ping it with like Magic Missile or Blazing Breath. You play Dazzling Healer with 2 spell boosts, you heal it for 3, and suddenly your minion is actually a, let's say, 5/4, and 5/4 is infinitely better than a 5/1, because that means your opponent will have to evo into it. And Dazzling Healer does that job very well, also being a 3 mana 2/3. Downside, you have to spell boost it. You cannot play it well from a top deck, which means that it's pretty average 3-drop, and that's why it will get 3-star rating. But definitely don't sleep on it. 3-drops are hard to come in Rune, definitely a card worth consideration. It is also a bronze, which means it will come more often than Clark, but if you see Dazzling Killer and Clark in one pick, I don't think that's possible. I think you only pick from bronze versus bronze and silver versus silver, except for neutrals. But if you see Dazzling Killer, you probably want to pick it, especially if you passed on several Clarks, by the way. Mage of Nightfall, it's another 3-drop, which kind of diffuses my opinion that 3-drops are hard to come by, but I would not call it a 3-drop, because it's a 3-mana 3-2. And 3-mana 3-2, like 2 health cards are probably 2-drops. 2 health cards are not worth more than a 2-drop. So Mage of Nightfall is not worth more than a 2-drop, which means it's a 1-star card. But if it's actually sigled out, if you for example play Redhot Ritual into Mage of Nightfall, that's a great value. You are getting a 4-drop, like 4-3 stealth, that's actually 4 or even 5-drop. So Mage of Nightfall is very highly synergistic card. You have to have early sigils in number of, let's say, 3 or 4 to play this card, which means it gets a 2-star rating. Holo Golem, it's a 4-mana 4-3, so aggressively stated. I don't really like this card unless you are playing Earth Sigils, because it's a 4-mana 3 health. The only difference between 3-mana 3-2 and 4-mana 4-3 is that most 3-drops have only 2 attack, which means Holo Golem will actually survive a trade with them. The bad thing is though, if your opponent plays 3-drop and you play a 4-drop, that means you are going first. And that means your opponent will just evolve over Holo Golem, and if you won't have any board left, and you probably won't, you will be forced to use a spell or evolve something stronger into the 4-drop. And if you evolve something stronger into the 4-drop, that means they can trade their 3-drop into your evolved 5-drop. That is damaged right now. That actually pretty feels bad, man. The only good thing about Holo Golem is that it's actually 4-3 and not a 3-4, and I just say that is a bad thing, but it is a good thing in one case, when you don't have Evo points anymore. In late game, when you are out of Evos, Holo Golem is one of the better 4-drops because it's aggressively stated, which means it can trade higher into 6-drops, into 5-drops, but it also have an Airfreight ability that is actually really premium. Like 4 mana, 3 damage that can go anywhere is worth 4 mana, that's what Demonic Strike is. And sticking that on a card for a cost of 1 single Earth Sigil is not much. Holo Golem is definitely one of the best Sigil effects, but you don't want to go crazy on here. I will still give him a 3-star rating. He's a very highly synergistic card, but he is definitely better stated than Mage of Nightfall. Enchanted Library. This is, read it as 2 mana draw 2 cards. Is that good? Yes, that's definitely good. You also are drawing very specific cards, you are drawing spells, which means that if you drafted something like Dance of Death, if you drafted a minion heavy deck with Dance of Death, like with Clarks, with Craigs, with a lot of spell boost, this draws you 2 spells, which means you will spell boost your other cards twice. This usually means that you can play Enchanted Library, then play a spell, then play a spell, then play like 2 spell boosted minions with effects, or even Craig and 2 spell boosted minions with effects. This works wonders together with Chimera, it works wonder with Daria. You definitely want to pick this card. It is not a 5-star card though, because there is a chance you will have very little of spells. If you run like 2 spells, you definitely don't want this card. If you run, let's say, 5 spells or more, you definitely want this card. And you will very often have 5 spells or more. That's why it is getting a 4-star rating. 2 mana draw 2 cards, always good. Just don't play it on 2 mana usually, unless you are going first or if your opponent missed a 2-drop. You generally want to not treat it as a 2-drop when it comes to drafting, you know, a general nice amount of 2-drops. Freshman Lu, it's a 2 mana 1/1 that draws you a card, very similar to Mage Leader. What is the difference in it is that Mage Leader actually drew you a minion, a commander, and commanders are known for strong effects and good curve. Lu draws you a spell boost card, which means that it will most likely draw you a minion of curve or will draw you a spell of curve, because spell boost cards are not meant to be played on curve. They are meant to be played after, above curve, there we go. Which means that Freshman Lu can fetch you cards like Furion Embrace, like Rime Wind. These are very bad examples of spell boost. But for 2 mana you can get like Ocular or, God forbid, Daria. That's really good. If you get Daria from Freshman Lu on turn 2, you actually are going to win this game very often, unless your deck is poor. And in Runecraft it's very easy to draft a poor deck. What is bad about Lu is that it has 0 synergy with Sigils. it has very low synergy with general average deck of Runecraft, but in Spellboost deck this is actually an amazing card. So I'm gonna give it a 2-star rating. It's very highly synergistic with Spellboost decks, and that's the only place when you want to draft blue. Magic Illusionist. It's a 2-mana 2/2, and that's already 3 stars, sure. But its effect is actually negative. I would say that Magic Illusionist is pretty bad on Arena when it comes to its effect, because it will consume a huge amount of your Earth Sigils without giving you much. Like, for every Earth Sigil, you get a 2/2. That's not too high of a price. That's only worth 2 mana. I mean, too high of a reward. That's only worth 2 mana, which means that Magic Illusionist is something like 2 mana that transforms every Earth Sigil into 2 mana minion. That means, like, for example, if you play a Witch Cauldron, Magic Illusionist, that Witch Cauldron is a 1 mana 2/2 draw a card. And that sounds really good, right? But that is good actually, but only in very early game, which means that Magic Illusionist, just as in Constructed, will only put work for you when you actually have 1 mana Earth Sigils. And 1 mana Earth Sigils are bronzes, which means you can draft them pretty often. But Magic Illusionist is a silver, and now when you compare the chances to draft all the Illusionists, all the Sigils, like, you're actually getting pretty risky, and I would rather draft Clark over Magic Illusionist, unless, of course, you are in need of 2-drops, right? Both Clark and Magic Illusionist are 3-star cards for me, and you generally, if you get a choice between Magic Illusionist and Clark, you pick the one that you need more on the curve. You need generally around 9, 8, 10 2-drops, something around it. And 3-drops, probably 4, 3, that's enough most of the cases, because you will need like 2 or 3 2-drops in the game, and generally you need only 1 3-drop, maybe 2 in the game. If you have no 6-drop or low 6-drops, you probably want to play more 3-drops. And Rune is pretty hard to get 6-drops unless you are lucky and get Disaster Witches or Professor of Tabus, which means that 3-drops will generally be more valuable than 2-drops. With that said, let's close this rating at 3 and move to the next card. Chimera. Now, this is a 9 mana 4/4 deal for damage to a minion. That is exactly Dread Dragon, but it's 2 mana more expensive for the exchange of the possibility of making it 2 mana less expensive. If you spellboost it twice, it's actually a Dread Dragon. And Dread Dragon was good on Arena, because right now it's out of Arena, but Dread Dragon was very likely played on Arena. Like, everybody loved Dread Dragon in their deck. And Chimera, even though it's 2 mana more expensive, it still does the same job. Also, Chimera being this expensive means that you have a lot of time to spellboost it. Of course, you would rather have it less time to spellboost it, but be able to play it more early naturally. But I'm talking like, you generally will not need Chimera until turn 7 or 8. And if you are playing Chimera on 8, it doesn't matter if it's 8 mana or if it's 7 mana, because you probably won't play a 1-drop with it anyway. That means that Chimera is just as good on 8 mana as a Dread Dragon was on 7 mana. And spellboosting this once is definitely not difficult. And if you top deck it and you have no opportunity to spellboost it, it's a 9 mana 4/4 that deals 4 damage. And if it's your only play a turn, I mean, do you even bother it? Does it even bother you spending 9 mana to do it? Not really if it's your only play. And that means that Chimera is actually pretty good. I'm not gonna give it a 4 stars because it is a spellboost dependent card, and you generally want to top deck it in the mid game to spellboost it for the late game or later mid game, which means this will be a generally 3-star card. It's pretty decent. You want to play it, definitely consider it. But if you are running a full Sigil deck, if you are drafting only Sigil and minions and you never combine the spellboost cards, then probably it's better to leave Chimera alone. Enchanted Sword, 0-star card. You would have to spellboost it 2 mana to be efficient. 5 spellboost is impossible to pull off on Arena unless you have a single card that we'll be talking about soon. Enchanted Sword is really bad, don't draft it, even in Daria decks. Even if you have 20 spells in your deck and you have Daria, don't draft Enchanted Sword because you will top deck it. You won't be spellboosting on curve, you won't be cycling, it will not be good. Don't pick Enchanted Sword. Magic Girl Melvie, very good draw engine. I would say that it actually draws you 7 cards, very often. Maybe not 7, but if you are empty-handed and you top deck Melvie, that's 7 cards for you. That's actually very dangerous because you can easily deck out in Arena. There is only 30 cards, and if you draw 7 of them, you will deck out very quickly. That's actually a double-edged sword, because if your opponent has 0 cards in hand, you have more cards in hand, and your opponent has only 7 cards in the deck, you can just force him to draw everything and literally mill him, because he will top deck the Reaper then, and he will die. The average thing about Melvi is that it will generally draw like 2 cards for both you and your opponent, but if you are drafting extremely aggressive deck with only 2 drops, with only spells, with a lot of well, resources that don't cycle into another spell or card, Magic Girl Melvi will be very efficient for you. And I'm gonna say that if she was a silver, she would be too insane. This effect is definitely not stackable. You don't want to stack it. So I would say pick 1 Magic Girl Melvi if you get her offered. Don't pick 2 of them. And I'm gonna give her 4-star rating. She is definitely good, but she won't generally carry you games. Elder Mage of Dragonlore. That's an 8 mana 4/4, which is pretty bad. But if you look at it, it's 8 mana 4/4 that summons a 5/5. Now, let's reverse that. Let's say it's a 8 mana 5/5. So already great stats, because for 8 mana you get a 5/5 card. That's acceptable. That's really good actually. And you are also summoning a 4/4? What? That's kind of broken. And there is more. If you have Earth Sigil, your 5/5 will actually be Storm, which means you can instantly trade, or even go face if you want. That's just simply broken. That is definitely more than you expect from a single card on Arena. And the only downside, I guess, is that it's 8 mana, and that's not even a downside, because you are getting so much value for this 8 mana. Imagine that you actually have an Evo, you get a 5/5 Storm and 6/6 Rush. That's crazy insane. That's like, board is yours immediately. Elder Mage of Dragonlore is a 5-star card every single time. There is not a single reason you would not pick it, unless your other card with it is something terrible, like, I don't even know what. Like, there is not that many terrible cards on the Gold and Legendary spot that you would not want to pick with it. It's probably a 5-star card every time. Unless your other pick is Daria and you are playing Spellboost heavy deck, then definitely go with Daria. But Elder Mage of Dragonlore is especially good if your deck lacks any synergies. If you are neither Spellboost, neither Earthright deck. Mutagenic Bolt. That's, let's count it as a 5 mana transform a minion into a 1/1. Because generally you are transforming 1 minion into a 1/1. If you are transforming more of them, it's actually worse on Arena, because you will lose more HP, and if you are forced to transform that many minions, that means you are probably behind on board. And if you are behind on board, giving them ability to do face damage to you, and also leaving the bodies on the board, because 1/1 is still a body, it can still go face, it's actually not good for you. So Mutagenic Bolt will be the example of a card that is really good in Constructed, but probably hard to use in Arena. Which doesn't mean it's a bad card. If you are actually on initiative, if you have white board, and your opponent plays, for example, a single big taunt, let's say the 7 mana 6/8 that discards the card in Dragon, you will actually get so much value from it. It's also a good re-comeback card. For example, your opponent played Bahamut, he came back on the board, he annihilated your board, and he has a 13/13 on the board. That's the definition of comeback. And Mutagenic Bolt will give him -12/-12 forever, and you'll also deal some damage to him. If he was forced to Bahamut you, that means you were on command in the board, and that means you dealt a lot of damage to his face, probably. That means that Mutagenic Bolt may actually be able to finish him off over several turns. And if you played Bahamut or other big bomb like Israfil or Olivia or something like that, it means that it is very late game, which means that this card actually leaves you 4 mana left to play, and its 4th mana you can probably spend on getting back into the initiative. If your opponent played Bahamut, they are empty boarded, you can Mutagenic Bolt, play a 4-drop, and a 4-drop versus a 1-drop when he probably is out of EVOs is actually very beneficial. So Mutagenic Bolt is a... I really want, and I guess you guys from what I was talking about, you think that I would give it a 4-star rating, but I'm only giving it 3 stars because it's a gold card and it will very often be matched with much better card against it. So generally, if I gave it a 4-drop, you could get confused and pick it over like Daria or something, but you definitely want to pick Daria over it every single time, no matter your deck. So that's why I want to rate it lower than Daria. I actually gave Daria 5 stars. I guess it's still 3 stars, because there are better 4-star cards. World Wielder Ginger. 0 stars, denies you all your battle cries. The only good moment to play it is like if you have 3 mammoths in your hand and you are going white. Actually, if you play 1 mammoth with Ginger, that makes her a 2-mana 4/4, which is better than Cinderella, and that's actually really good. But the fact that your minions also cannot attack face is really easy to play around. You just attack first and then play the Ginger. But I would not say that this is a good card, guys. I will give it a 1 star just because it really combos well with very heavy decks. But why not 2 star? Because it's highly synergistic with heavy decks. It's not, because how do you draft heavy deck in Rune? Your heavy cards are Shadow Mage, which is the best battle cry on Arena, or Fanfare Effect. It's Disaster Witch, which is also great. It's Annabel, which is also great. Like, you don't want to pass on these battle cries or fanfares. So Ginger is definitely not a card you want in your average deck. I could give it 0 stars, but I'm gonna give her 1 star. But it's a 1-star legendary, which means you will never pick it, because always other cards will be better around it. It's almost like a 0 star. 1 star in legendary tier is literally a 0 star. You will never pick it. Hulking Giant. It's a 6-mana 6/6 that is immune to spells. I mean, cannot be targeted. How is that bad? Like, my question is, how is that bad? 6-mana 6/6 that is really hard to get removed. And also it has another effect that discards all your sigils, but gives +2/+2 to the Hulking Giant for every sigil discarded. Which means if you discard 1 sigil, your opponent is probably not even able to evolve over it on curve. What? That is like broken. Hulking Giant is an easy 4-star card, just because it will get all your sigils out of your hand, and that is sometimes no good. In very heavy sigil deck, you actually want Professor of Taboos over the Hulking Giant, because you can control the usage of your sigils better. And yeah, Hulking Giant 4-star card, definitely worth to pick it, definitely a playable card. But he's not a 5-star, just as Professor of Taboo was, because Taboo gives you a better long game run. Hulking Giant is that one all-in card that if it gets removed by, let's say, Bane evolution, then you just simply lost all your sigils and all your synergy is gone. That's why 4-star. Even if you don't play sigils, I would actually say that if you don't play any sigils, that you are a spell boost deck, Hulking Giant is even better than in the sigil deck. Witch of Switch, 2-mana 2/2, 3-star rating. Draw a card, 5-star rating. Draw a card with a condition, probably 4-star rating. If you have having more neutrals in hand than more class cards is very easy to combine, because generally you have like 30% of your deck on average is neutrals. You will have something like 8 or 10 depending on the draft. Generally you will have around 8 or 9, and that's like 1/3 of your deck, but a bit lower, so let's say 30%. And if you say that I can play 2-mana 2/2 that draws a card 30% of the time on random, I would definitely play that. It's definitely in the spirit more of a Hearthstone than Shadowverse, but I would play that in Shadowverse. I would play that in Hearthstone probably, if it was a 2-mana 3/2, because that's the average stat line of a 2-drop, and it was actually drawing me a card 1/3 of the time on random. I would play that, definitely. And Witch of Switch is just this kind of effect that you can control slightly better. For example, playing your other class 2-drops earlier, and then when you are left with more late-game neutral cards like Mammoths, Israfils, Bahamut's, if you drafted them, of course, you want to play Witch of Switch later and actually draw a card from it, because 2-drops have this magical proficiency. I don't know if that's the word here, but that they actually are good at any point of the game because they fill the curve very smoothly. And that's why Witch of the Switch will get 4 stars from me, and we'll move on. Apprentice Sword Mage, 4-mana 3/4, 3 stars. 4-mana 3/4 that gains +1/+1. That's actually well, 4 mana 5/4, and that's kind of a 5-star card. But again, just like Witch of Sweets, it's not every single time. It's on average 1 in 3 times, which means it will get 3-star rating. Why 3-star instead of 4-star? Because 2 drops are infinitely better than 4 drops, and 4 drops are infinitely better than any other drops. That's like my my range of value of the mana curve, right? You value your late game, so like 7, 6 drops pretty low. You value, after that, you value your 3 drops and your 5 drops because they are important to set up and to continue the evolution wars. Then you value your 8 drops, which are your finishers most of the times. Then you value your 4 drops, which are the cards that initiate the evolution wars. And if one player has a 4 drop for evolution war and the other doesn't, the evolution war is always won by the guy with 4 drop. Like, no matter what other cards you are playing in the evolution war, the one that started with 4 drop will always win. So it's very important to have 4 drops. But if you don't have 4 drops, you can play double 2 drop and it's good enough in the evolution war. So 4 drop is only good on 4, 2 drop is good on 2 drop, on 3 drop, and on 4 drop. 2 drops are single-handedly the best mana tier in entire arena. That doesn't mean you have to draft 20 of them, but if you drafted 22 drops and some drops or finishers, you would probably be fine. So yeah, that's why this is only 3 stars, not 4 like Witch of Sweets. Carbuncle of Mysteria, it's a 2 mana 2/1, which most of the cases will be just a 2 mana 2/2 because it will trade for other 2/2. But it can get pinged off by Lerial and Angel of the World, which are very common picks on Arena. But it also has a last word effect that spell boosts your entire hand. So if you say that, you can compare it very easily. It's actually a 2 mana spell that summons you a 2/1. And how is that better than Conjur Golem, which summons you a 2/2? It's not. How many stars did Conjur Golem get? I believe 4 or 3. I'm actually really bad at remembering things. I always work on the impulse, on the spot. That's why I never prepare for recording videos. I just go on spot. That's much better for me. That's much better for my thoughts. And this is definitely worse than Conjur Golem. But again, the difference between 1 and 2 health on a 2 drop will rarely matter unless it's late game. So Carbuncle of Mysteria is definitely worse in late game than Conjur Golem. But is it? Because it actually spell boosts your cards. Well, so does Conjur Golem. So there is literally a single part that says Carbuncle of Mysteria is as good as Conjur Golem. The only part that says it's better is that if you play it, you can top deck a spell boost card. So basically you get like 1 additional draw before you spell boost cards. But this draw is not even implemented into the Carbuncle. It's just as you waited with the Golem a bit turn. It's like giving Golem the Storm, basically. It's like making Carbuncle of Mysteria a 2 mana Golem that cannot attack, but on the next turn it gets Storm, something like that. Or a 2 mana 2/2 that spell boosts your cards on the next turn. I mean, Golem will always be better than Carbuncle, so there is not a single doubt in this choice. Always pick the Golem over this, but I would say it's just as good as the Golem. If it was a 1/2, then it would be pretty bad because it dies to Owlcat, it cannot trade with a 2 drops, but as a 2/1, it's perfectly fine, 3 stars. Witch Cauldron is a 2-star card. Let's start with that. And why is it a 2-star? It is a sigil, which means it's very highly synergistic. It draws you a card, which means that it should be a 4-star card. Like, what the hell, Roxos? This card is a 1 mana sigil that draws you a card. It's insane. Technically, but is it insane if you not draft a single Airfright? Then it's literally a 1 mana, take a spot on your board forever. It's literally not insane. It's a synergistic card. You cannot play that without Airfrights, and you have to be guaranteed to draw the Airfright, and you have to be guaranteed to draw the Elf Sigil, because this is the example of very passive Elf Sigil that without Airfright does nothing. Like, you can draw Redhot Ritual and be fine with it, even if you don't draw a single Airfright. But if you draw Witch Cauldron, you literally have to draw Airfright, otherwise it's a dead card, and you don't want to have a single dead card in your deck. That's why you draft it only if you have Airfrights, and you only drive let's say borderline Airfrights that are pretty bad without a sigil, only if you have sigils. There is really hard, very hard border here, right? Like, if you want to draft Earthrights only if you have Seagulls, and you only want to draft Seagulls if you have Earthrights, how do you start this chain? And the answer is you start it very early into the draft. If you have half of your deck ready and you haven't drafted a single Earthright or a single Seagull, you probably should give up on them unless you get both of them in a single pick. If you get both of them in the single pick, then you have the increased range of drawing a bit more Seagulls for consistency or a bit more Earthright for consistency. But generally you want to only draft it in pair or early into the draft. The other case being you draft your Earthrights or Seagulls that are good on their own, like Redhot Ritual or Holo Golem or Professor of Taboos, and then you see, oh, I already have a good Earthright, why don't I boost it with some Seagulls? Yeah, you can do that, definitely. Remember that cards like Magic Illusionist or Professor of Taboos can hit infinite amount of Earth Seagulls, which means that drafting one Professor of Taboos and 7 Seagulls is usually fine, as long as you don't get flooded by Seagulls early into the game. So you usually actually will get flooded because that's a karma for drafting a bad deck, and you want to avoid that. But let's say Professor of Taboos takes on average 1 Seagull, actually, because he will die every single time. So, and Magic Illusionist will eat like 3, maybe 2 Seagulls, depending on how fast you can throw them at your opponent. With that said, let's move on to the next card. Illusionist. That's a 5 mana 4/4, which summons a 4-drop with Rush for a turn. If you actually had a 4-drop and it died in Evolution War, you can play Illusionist. Your 4-drop will probably be able to kill the 5-drop that evolved over your 4-drop that is now resurrected, and Illusionist can then evo for free over something smaller, or you can evo her for tempo, or you can just leave her here and save your evo point. That's a great value. That is literally the great value. And what are we talking about? We are talking about 5-drops. How many 5-drops do we have in Rune? Really not so many, right? I mean, there is the how you call it, the statue, the statue that gives you Earth Sigil, and there is Illusionist, and there is what else? Like, can you take it out of your head, like on spot? Think of a 5-drop? I can't. I mean, I probably reviewed them already in this video, but as I said, I'm thinking in now and here. So Illusionist is actually something good, right? The only problem is that it is silver, so it will not be seen that often. And let's say that you resurrect a 2-drop with it. Let's say you only played 2 drops until now. You get a 5 mana 4/4 that deals 2 damage. That's not bad. That's actually pretty good. So I would say that Illusionist is actually a 4-star card that you want to draft every single time. Actually, you know what? We'll give it a 5-star. I think we'll give it a 5-star. It's even stronger when you go into late game. You can kill mammoths with this effect. If you kill the minion that has, like, let's say 5 attack and mammoth is damaged already. Like, this is extremely powerful. If you actually evolve it, you can probably even take down Bahamut sometimes. Illusionist is really high potential card, and do not sleep on it, guys. Mr. Heinlein Shadow Mage. Now, this is something I was waiting to talk about for the entire video, guys. This card single-handedly brought Rune back into Arena. Arena Rune died after losing all the Earth Sigil effects from standard and basic cards, and Mr. Heinlein kind of brought spell boost mechanic back into Arena, because we got plenty of spell boost card, right? We got Daria, for example, in was it Tempest of the Gods? And back then in Tempest of the Gods, the Arena actually had the Earth Seagulls, so it was really awkward because you are drafting Earth Seagulls and you wanted Earth Seagulls legendary, and then suddenly you get Daria. That's pretty bad. But right now we have this heavy spell boost potential in Arena, and Mr. Heinlein is actually godly. Like, I'm not gonna give him 5 stars because you can still draft Seagulls or neutral Rune, but if you are drafting spell boost Rune, or you actually, no, never mind, I'm giving him 5 stars. That's because he is a 5 mana 6/5 ward, and that's actually like Jolly Rogers has that effect on random, and this card has that effect guaranteed and can also boost your cards by 5. If you have, let's say, 7 cards in hand that were not boosted once, it's 35 spell boost, right? That's Am I wrong? No, I'm not wrong. That's actually a crazy spell boost, but on average you will boost 1 or 2 cards by like 4 or 3, which means that this card will generally give you about 7 mana, and isn't that crazy? Like a 6-drop that gives you 7 mana for later turns? That's kind of insane. I mean, this is easily a 5-star card. If you spell boost 1 card, it's actually good enough. If you spell boost Chimera, you get a 4 mana 4/4 that deals 4 damage. Like, this card would be banned from every single tournament, even if it was a legendary. Like, this card would be crazy insane, and this is what Mr. Heinlein does to Chimera. Because even if your Chimera is spell boosted by something, it will always spell boost it up to 5. And that is actually insane on every single spell boost card. Like, it's guaranteed Daria effect on cards you already have in hand, so you can consciously spell boost them. Like, let me just finish here, because I could go on and on in circles about this guy. He's just crazy insane. He brought a new soul into Rune, and I really thank Cygames for releasing this card. Only downside, it's a silver, so sometimes you will not see him, but if you are drafting, whatever deck you are drafting, if you see him, just pick him. On the off chance you are forced to draft a spell boost card. And you will most likely be forced to draft a spell boost card sooner or later. This card is simply insane, best card in Arena, in Rune. You don't want to pick anything over it, you always want to have it. Mysterian Grimoire, 1-star. Very rarely you will actually draw 2 cards of it and not lose any spells. Most of the cases you will already have spells in hand, and this card will be sitting in your hand for a very long time, and then on, let's say turn 10, you play this, you draw 2 situative spells that you don't want to use now, and you discard them. Pretty bad card. Let's not draft it, guys. Oz is much better, because Oz can actually, is a stronger body, it's much better when it comes to mana cost, draws you more cards, and gives you a much better chance of using the cards you drew. So this is infinitely worse than Oz. 1-star, probably even 0 most of the cases, but if for example you somehow drafted only Sigil and minions, this is a great card. 3 mana 1 to draw 2 cards is always great. Gingerbread House. This is like Will of the Forest, but for additional 1 mana you get to heal. I would say that this 1 mana actually doesn't really matter that much, because if you are going first in Arena, you would usually play Redhot Ritual on turn 3, because you are going first. When your opponent plays a 2-drop, you have 3 mana already. Gingerbread House does the same and heals you. Usually this heal won't matter, but let me just say that this is very comparable to Redhot Ritual. It also is a sigil, so it has some synergy, but it's a sigil that you can draft without synergy. So I'm gonna give it a 3-star rating, just as Redhot Ritual. It's kind of worse, I would say it's a 2.5 star, but we are not using half stars, hence why this is only be a 3-star. Falis. Isn't that card insane? Let's say that you actually have 0 neutrals in your hand. Falis is a 5 mana 3/6. That's perfectly reasonable. Falis is a 5 mana 3/6 that on 7 mana will be a 4/7 storm. Let's think about 4 mana storms. Alucard, 4/4. Soul Dominator, 4/6. Emeralda, 4/5, with a condition. So like, every 7-drop with Storm is only 4 damage. Falis is also 4 damage, but she outvalues them all with health total. The only drawback is that you cannot evolve her further. You can do that with the Alucard and stuff. So technically Falis is worse than them, but let's think realistically. How often will you have your evolve point on 7 mana? The answer is never if you are playing Arena well. If you are playing Arena well, you will always evo on your turn 4, 5 and 6. That's probably a requirement to a good game. The only exception is like if your opponent completely skips a turn, because then evolving doesn't make sense, because your opponent will anyway evo the minion turn after on your minion, and you will have to evo a stronger minion into it, so literally nothing will change. And yeah, so if your opponent skips a turn or plays something laughable, you probably want to skip the evo, but Falis is actually a card that will give you additional evo point. And if you want to play her on 5, sure. If you, on average, you will have like 2 or 1 neutral cards in hand at turn 5, which means this will be a 5 mana 3/6, deal 2 damage, and on Evo it can also go face. Like, It's pretty good. If you want to compare it like to Rush, if you trade with Phallus, then she's somewhat of a 5 mana 2/5 that deals 2 damage, and that's actually wonderful. If I had a card that says 5 mana 2/5 deal 2 damage, I would play it every single time, because 2/5 is probably the best stats for a 4-drop, and 2 damage to a minion is worth around 1 mana, so Phallus is kind of above average. She's actually above average. She's better without Evo, and she has free Evo built in. That's a great card. I'm gonna give it a 5-star rating, because she's also a 5-drop, and just as I said, 5-drops are really hard to imagine in Rune. You don't see those 5-drops that often, and that's actually a problem. And with the latest expansion, we got Illusionist and Phallus, which are also very good together, because you can Illusionist the Phallus, evolve her, and go face instead of going into the minion. And yeah, Illusionist sadly is not neutral, but it will be beautiful, but it would be too broken. Master Mage Levi, another 5-star card. It's a 6 mana 4/4 that deals 3 damage to anything you want, so it's literally a 2 mana 4/4, because dealing 3 damage to anything you want is worth 4 mana. And Master Mage Levi gives you that for 2 mana. And I would even say for 1 mana, because a 4/4 stats is kind of like a 4.5 mana, and then you get for 1 mana the ping for 3 damage, and then for half mana you combine 2 cards together. But Master Mage Levi is an easy 5-star card. You draft him every time, even if you don't have Seagulls. If you see him on the first pick, you take him every time, and you try to draft Seagull deck. But if you fail, it's still fine. 6 mana 4/4 deal 3 damage is perfectly fine. Like, it's Holo Golem that doesn't require a Seagull, and if he gets a Seagull, you actually cast Demonic Strike on every single target. That's really good. Golem Assault. 2 mana, draw a 2 mana spell that casts a 3/3 ward. So basically 4 mana summon a 4/4 in worst case scenario. If you cast it on 6 mana, it's like 4 mana summon a 3/3, repeat 3 times. For the cost of 4 mana, of course, every single time. If you cast it with a Sigil, it's actually 6 mana plus 3 mana, so 9 mana, summon 3 3/3 wards, and that's actually on curve on the power level of the Death's Breath. So this is literally Death's Breath of Rune that requires you to have Earthright, Earth Sigil instead of 6 Necromancy, but is a bit more versatile. The total cost is higher, but you can actually pull it off on turn 7 for not even your entire mana. Like, if you cast it on turn 6 with no benefits on turn 6, on turn 7 you get, for 3 mana you get a better Death's Breath, and you have 4 mana to spend, so you can definitely come back on the board very easily. Losing your turn 6 to set up the Golem Assault is definitely worth it. Even if you don't play anything else on the turn 7, or you didn't have Sigil on turn 6, it's literally turn 6 and 7 summon 3 3/3 wards, and that means for turn 6 and 7 you summon 12 worth of mana in 1 card. That's actually pretty good. You could compare it to like cycle a card or something, but because you draw additional cards on a turn, but it's not how you should compare it. You should generally look at its original value. And one thing that bothers me with this card is that it's 3 mana. I mean, it's, what am I talking about? It's that it's a gold, which means that you will always see this instead of like Phallus, Professor of Taboos, Daria, Bahamut, Olivia, but it's also pretty synergistic with both Earth Sigil and Spell Boost deck, because it gives you 4 spells if you cast it on 6. So it is a very good between card that you can draft for both decks, and that will be very useful if you try to combine both archetypes. So I'm gonna give it a 3-star rating. It's a pretty good card. Don't go crazy on it, it's definitely not a must pick, and most golds and legendaries were rated higher. So Golem Assault will probably see a less play than most of the golds in Arena if you go by my guide, but definitely good enough. You draft it over Ginger every single time, so I guess it's something. Wizardess of Oz, with that we are coming to a conclusion of the Guide of Rune. It was actually the longest video from all the guides, because Rune requires a lot of thought, guys. It's not an easy class to play on Arena, it's the hardest class to play on Arena. Wizardess of Oz is insane. It will draw you 5 cards, so it's literally Daria. It will spell boost all your spells to 1 mana, except for the spell boost spells. So I guess that this is actually not that easy to go by, because Wizardess is not really synergistic with your spell boost cards. Usually you will end up discarding them or banishing, But Wizardess of Oz is still a 5 mana 4/5, which is perfectly fine. That's already a 3 stars. It draws you up to a 5 cards in hand, which is already a 4 star. And it also chips down your spells, which are non-spell boost, to 1 mana, which is probably a 5 star. I would give Wizardess a 5 star, or actually a 4 star, because she will discard your spell boost cards. She's insane in all the Sigil decks. She's insane in all the neutral decks. What I call the neutral deck is not actually like the neutral base deck, because you cannot draft that many neutrals, but a deck that is neither spell boost, neither Sigil. It can contain a bit of both, like for example Redhot Ritual, or let's say Holo Golem, or let's say Windblast, because they are all spells that are pretty good without spell boosting or without Sigils, but Wizardess is perfect in those kind of decks, because usually you will only get good spells from it. Like, you can gather, like, let's say, Dance of Death, Demonic Strikes not, but you can gather, like, Dance of Death, Call of Cocytus, again, bad example, but Dance of Death, let's stick to Dance of Death. You can gather, like, 3 Dance of Deaths, play Wizardess on 8, draw a card, kill 3 units, deal 6 damage to a face. That's a really good turn on 8. So, Wizardess, definitely great, definitely 4 stars. I'm not gonna give it 5, because I would still pick Daria above it, or Professor of Tabus. Next up, we have the last card of this, which is Abomination Awakened, and, well, that's a 0 star. Or is it? Well, let's think about it, right? Because Rune is actually has really expensive and hard cards to play. Like, Abomination Awakened says that it's a 3 mana 6/6 that cannot attack, but if you but its evolved form actually can attack, doesn't get stats, and also if on your turn you draw your 9th card, so you'll get full hand, this will evolve automatically and deal additionally 3 damage to all your enemies. I believe only minions, not face. But that means if you evolve it, it's actually a 3 mana 6/6 with Rush. That means it's a 3 mana 4/4 that is unplayable unless you evo it. And there will never be a case that you draw your 9th card. You would literally pass every single turn or play like Hyper Draw, but there is no Hyper Draw anymore. We lost Fate's Hand, we lost all the... well, we still have like the Mystery Library, something, Arkin Library, I think that's the name, the 2-mana amulet, and you could play it with that, but you will need like 3 of these libraries to make it work. I would say that Abomination Awakened is a 3-star card, because you don't look at its effect, you just look at it as 3 mana 4/4, cannot attack, must be evolved to attack, but gains +2/+2. I would look at this card like that. You always will have to evolve it. If you don't evolve it, your opponent might actually be afraid of it being alive. So if you have it, you should probably bluff and play a lot of like cycle cards and keep your other cards in hand, so your opponent actually panics and rides into it. Because if you actually get the 9 cards in hand and you activate its effect, it's a guaranteed win. Like, your opponent cannot come back after a free evo point and a Master Mage Levi effect on your entire board. Like, this is a 7 mana worth of value. It's arcane knowledge that is actually arcane lore, I mean, that's actually out of Arena because it's from standard expansion, but it is this kind of value. So Abomination Awakened, definitely something that you can look out for, definitely very rewarding if you play it well, but definitely not something I would recommend. Again, it's a legendary tier, so I can give it 3 stars, and still it's worse than most of the good cards, but on 3 stars it's again better than cards like Ginger, and it's on similar power level to Golem Assault, but I would pick Golem Assault over this most of the times. With that said, guys, it's the end of the journey. What is Sammy doing here? Oh right, basic cards. We have basic cards to go. I thought we started from basics. I probably set my my slideshow a bit differently, so the video gets longer here. We'll go fast, guys, like Sonic. Sammy is a 2 mana 2/2, 3 stars. Draw both players a card, still 3 stars. It's just a 3 stars. It's very good when you are playing Spellboost heavy deck because you cycle a lot, and that's really good in Spellboost decks. But it's also good if you play combo decks like Earth Sigils, because you cycle a lot. I would say that it's most likely a 4-star card, but I'm gonna give it only 3 just because it also draws for your opponent. and you don't want to play it if your opponent gets to use his card first. So if you play it on 2, you actually give your opponent more options before you give yourself more options. And that's semi-not optimal. Wait, was that the only card? Really? Or what is Insight? Insight is basic. I think we just skipped Sammy for some reason. Yeah, we just skipped Sammy for some reason. Alright, I guess I got lost. I don't know why Sammy is here. I'm downloading the images from the Shadow Portal website, and the images are named to be sorted in mana cost and expansion. So first comes expansion, there comes mana cost. Alright guys, anyway, this is the end of this guide. 1.5 hours, a lot of time, a lot of talking, but I hope that somebody will learn something from it. And with that said guys, I'm pretty sure that I explained this class pretty well. I'm actually very content with my work. I hope that these guides are helping you. I really appreciate a lot of views. Actually, I'm getting more views than on average from only my subscribers. I'm not sharing these videos yet on any Facebook or Reddit. I will do that once the series is complete, and then we'll see. I also was talking with a particular team. I won't say the name here, but maybe they will publish this work of mine as their official arena guide, because I have pretty good contacts with that team. But we'll be talking about it, so I don't want to promise anything. But with that said, peace out guys. May you find luck in Sigils and Spellboost in Rune, because it's really exciting to draft. It's really boring to play if you draft it poorly, but it has potential guys. I definitely got many 5 wins with Rune after rotation, especially after Wonderland Dreams. So, peace out.